Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Hi.
Hey.
Okay, before we get into what is going to be a two-part book club, because we have that much to say about the Enneagram, want to remind you that finally, Getting Over People-Pleasing is open for enrollment. And today is the last day to get it for a much cheaper price. You can get it for, what are we giving them? $50 off?
$50.
So,
as of the end of the day today.
Yeah. So I'm not telling you the code for the $50 off. If you want that, go get on the VIP list if you haven't for some reason gotten on that yet and received that code, then get on the list in the episode description and you will get the code emailed to you, and it is good through the end of the day. Now, that doesn't mean you can't still enroll if you're hearing this later. Enrollment will be open until Tuesday. This coming Tuesday, the 27th. So you haven't missed out. You're just going to be paying $50 more, but I mean, hopefully that wouldn't be the end of the world if you're still intent on joining us. But save a little money. Why not?
Especially because we're not going to be doing this for the foreseeable future, at least probably a year. Right. So if you want to join us, now is the time.
Got to do it. So myriad reasons why I wanted to talk about the Enneagram. One is that it's really timely because this is one of the first assignments we're having people do in the course. Because your personality type has a lot to do with how you people please and whether you people please.
Among many, many other things.
Oh,
but
yes.
That is one of the characteristics that makes more sense to you when you understand your Enneagram type.
Yeah,
or your collection of types.
Yes.
You're like, oh, no wonder I have a proclivity for people pleasing. Makes sense.
Yes. So the Enneagram is about way more than that, and we're going to get into all of that. But there's so much relevance that we're having people take it and share in the forum what their type is. And I'm going to be curious to see if there's any patterns that emerge.
I have a feeling there's going to be, and I already think I know what some of the patterns are.
I think I do too.
We're going to do an experiment. We're going to see if we're right.
So we're getting into, instead of an expert interview, which is what we would normally have on the last Friday of a month, we're having a two-part book club because whenever we have 5 Fridays in a month, the last Friday is dedicated to a book. But because this book is so meaty and because there is so much to say about the Enneagram and because it's so helpful, we wanted to really expand. So part 1 is today and part 2 will be next Friday. So
we're kind of using the authors of the Enneagram book as our experts. We're just not able to talk to them directly.
So the book itself is The Wisdom of the Enneagram by Don Richard Riso and Russ Hudson. It's 20 years old. It was published in 1999. Do I think this is the book you have to read? No. There's a bunch of books on the Enneagram. This is just the one that my therapist recommended to me. And so I was like, fine, I'll take her word for it.
It's very comprehensive. It reads almost like a textbook. I mean, more interesting than a textbook, but
it's like a textbook.
It's as dense as a textbook.
It's not light reading.
No.
Unless you're a Hermione Granger. It's not light reading. So it may not be for everyone. To me, it's actually a really good reference book. And it's helpful. You don't even have to read it all at once, but especially if you want to know more about the other types or if you want to learn more about the other types in your life, I think it's really helpful to have it on hand so that when you encounter someone, you can look them up and figure out what's going on. Oh, okay. So I'm not saying you have to sit down and read this one cover to cover. It's not going to read like a nonfiction memoir.
You don't really need to read it cover to cover. The first 100-ish pages are explaining all the different facets of the Enneagram. And then there are dedicated sections to each of the types. So you don't necessarily need to read every single type. You might just read the ones that apply to you.
So if you haven't taken the Enneagram, which if you don't know what it is by now, it's a personality test and a way of, there are 9 types. We'll get into what it is and how it helps you understand yourself in a second. But if you want to take it, there's a bunch of places you can take it because unlike like the MBTI, for example, there isn't one centralized like person or institute that owns the concept of the MBTI. The Enneagram is kind of it's like a crowd share type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are multiple places you can take it. So we've linked to 2 of them where we've both taken it, a free version and a paid version. The paid version is $12. So it's not going to break your bank if you want to do
And
that.
having done both, the paid version, for at least in my experience, was way more accurate and gave you a lot more information. In fact, when I took the free one, it was a little bit off for me personally, which I think is normal. But the paid one is much more in-depth. It takes you about 40 minutes to get through all the questions.
It's 144 questions.
And you're going to get a full report. So for $12, I think that's worth it.
I thought it was worth it. So, okay. What is the Enneagram?
Well, in a nutshell, we're going to get into what that means.
We're not experts. We just read this book, okay?
It's a lot of things, but it boils down to really a system for mapping out 9 fundamental personality types when it comes to human nature and the complex interrelationships that we have and how we relate to other people and how we relate to circumstances in our life. So it's a development of modern psychology that has roots in spiritual wisdom, but a lot of also ancient traditions as well. So it's a hodgepodge of a lot of different ideologies, traditions, comes from a lot of different places. There's no real one source of the Enneagram. Yeah. Which makes it, I think, really cool and interesting.
Well, because everyone has a different layer and lens through which you can look through depending on who's adapting it and who's adding to it. And for that reason, I do think it's cool because it isn't just like a one-size-fits-all thing. So the word Enneagram comes from the Greek word for 9, ennea, and the Greek word for figure, which is gramos. So AKA, it's a 9-pointed figure. So if you Google the Enneagram, you'll see that there's this 9-pointed geometric shape with each type placed at a different point around it, sort of in a clockwise fashion.
When you see it,
it makes sense.
It'll make more sense to you. I think it's cool because so that the MBTI, for example, was made by a mother-daughter duo. Like they are the creators of the entire concept.
Yeah.
But the Enneagram is not like that.
Like we just said, it's developed by so many people over thousands of years.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different aspects that have been infused into it, which makes it really complex, but also really all-encompassing.
So, okay, what does it actually help us understand? So, one, there's a lot of things that it can help us understand, and we're going to try to sum this up in a way that makes sense. And then eventually we're going to actually explain each of the 9 types. So like, hold on. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to recognize yourself. So it helps us understand our core psychological issues, your interpersonal strengths and weaknesses, and then effective ways of dealing with those weaknesses and putting them to good use.
And really, it's measuring the filters that we all use to view ourselves, other people, and generally the world around us.
It's measuring our core motivations, unconscious childhood messages, and then like our troublesome habits, the comfort zone that... So the way I like to think of it, because so much of this is just words, is that the Enneagram is your type is the comfort zone of your personality. It's where you're going to default to when you're triggered or you're under stress, aka when you're not acting in a very evolved way.
When you're not someone who's practicing self-awareness, you're going to default to these tendencies.
Yeah.
But because of that, it also shows you the direction of growth that will serve you best on all kinds of different levels, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So it kind of says, here's what will happen if you don't do the spiritual and the growth work. And here's where you can go if you do that work.
Yeah. So your Enneagram type, to put it another way, it's like your home base, because we all need a basic personality type, which is another word for saying that is an ego, or else you'd have no personality, or you'd have multiple personalities, which is not ideal. So the more you operate from that home base, the more you tend to be trapped by the predilections of your type. So unlike other personality assessments, the Enneagram isn't here to say, hey, embrace all of this and it's going to be great. It actually shows you the ickier underbelly of yourself, which will be dead apparent when you know what your type is, because the first reaction you're probably going to have is, ooh, I feel called out.
Oh, I feel seen, but in a kind of embarrassing way, like, yeah.
Because it's showing you what you default to, kind of like, not at your worst necessarily. It can be at your worst, but it's showing you like, it's like this. When you have your hand on the wheel of a car, you can steer it. When you take it off, it veers in a particular direction, and it will always kind of want to veer in that same direction. That's your personality. Your personality is going to always be veering in the same direction, and it's up to you to keep your hand on the wheel and to steer in a better direction. And the Enneagram helps you realize what direction you kind of are going to steer in if you're not careful, and then what the proper direction of growth is for your type.
Yes.
Yes.
So when you stop the automatic, so the car automatically veering the way it wants to, which is what your personality is trying to have you do. So when you stop that by bringing awareness to, okay, these are my default tendencies. I understand this is how I'm going to go if I don't pay attention. Then you can become awake. You can become truly self-aware. And because of that, the less you identify with that personality and with those default tendencies, you recognize them, but you can overcome them and identify the way you want to identify versus the way you just naturally would. It actually can be very empowering to understand these default tendencies and to be able to say, do I want to keep doing that or do I choose something else?
Yes. So the way that they put it in the book is the Enneagram does not put you in a box. It shows you the box you're already in and then the way out of the box.
Yeah, I love that. That's a very clear way of describing it. So this was so true about Rachel and Matt. When you discover your type, you're going to know it on this deep core level.
Yeah. Yep.
That, as the book says, waves of relief and embarrassment, of elation and chagrin are likely to sweep over you. Things that you have always known unconsciously about yourself will suddenly become clear and life patterns will emerge. And that was absolutely my reaction. I was like, oh, that's not just me. That's a whole type of person.
I felt shame when I read it, like hot shame. I did, but not in a like, I don't know how to say. It was like a, I don't want to say good kind of shame.
Almost a relief.
Kind of. It was just like a, oh God, that's it. Oh no, that's exactly it. Oh shit, I never put that into words. Like I had never put that into words before, which impressed me.
The person with all the words?
Yeah, well, the person who's always thinking about this stuff and is so focused on personal development and self-awareness. When I read that, I was like, oh, everything I thought that was special or unique about myself isn't. Also, thinking you're special and unique is my type's problem, apparently. It was validating, but in a kind of like, oh, I got to step up kind of a way. I got to like be cognizant because there's some unconscious stuff going on here.
Oh, yeah. I felt that way, too. I'd always felt like, I feel like I'm maybe too adaptable, but also I am just adaptable. So what is me and what is too much? And then I read my type and I was like, oh crap. That's like a whole thing that I didn't even know existed.
This is my personality. This isn't just a unique me problem. It's a personality type problem.
There's a whole group of us who are struggling with this same thing.
So, okay, we're going to get into the 9 types, but before we do, we want to give you a few things that the book wants you to keep in mind. 1, everyone has a certain mix of types, usually with one that's dominant. And your basic type is likely to stay the same throughout your life. But it is not like you are just a 9 and that is it. It is more like you tend to veer toward that one more often, but you can absolutely have others that are informing and that you're defaulting to sometimes, just not nearly as regularly.
Yeah, and these descriptions, as you're going to hear us read a quick overview of each one, they apply to everyone the same, regardless of gender or anything else. Although the way that they each individual person expresses their type is going to be a little different, of course. So not all 4s are going to look the exact same. Obviously, not all 7s are going to look the exact same because, but at their core, their motivations, their fears, their desires, those are going to be very similar. It's just the expressions are going to take on each person's individual flavor.
Yeah. So for each type, there is a spectrum ranging from healthy to average to unhealthy thoughts and feelings and behavior for each type. So what that means is that you could meet a very evolved 8, for example, who seems completely different than an unevolved, unhealthy 8. They will seem like 2 totally different people because they're on totally opposite ends of the health spectrum.
Yes.
For their type. Now, we're not going to get into the health spectrum on this episode or the next episode of each type because that would take so long. That's why you take it yourself. In each one, they give you that information of like what is and you can, Kristen and I clocked where we are on the health spectrum of our type, and I'm hanging out in the healthy range most of the time, but am I dipping into average sometimes? Sure. Have I been in unhealthy at times? Yep.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah, there are 9 different categories of health, and so you can read the statements that align with each one and be able to say, okay, that sounds like me most of the time, and pretty accurately measure yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just, before we get into these 9 types, I want to make it very clear that none of these types are better than others.
No.
So you're going to be tempted to be like, ooh, that one sounds cool, or ooh, I should want to be that one. They have equal values, they have equal challenges. They're all equally good.
Or bad.
Or bad. But it is true that just in the same way that in for example, the Western world, extroversion is valued higher than introversion, which is not right.
It's complete bullshit.
It's not right, but it's how our society tends to reward people. There are certain types that you're going to see get more...
They get more rewarded for certain things.
They get validation, they get raises, they get social benefits from their type. But that doesn't actually make their type any better.
No, it just means our society sucks.
Right. It just means we're unequal. Just like in every other way.
Which also is to say the numbers don't mean anything. Like a 9 is not better than a 7 just because it's a higher number. The numbers are just there to... Well, they said that the reason that numbers were chosen was because they don't have any emotional significance. It keeps things neutral.
Yeah, I like that they use numbers because...
A 9 doesn't inherently mean anything different than a 5.
Right, there's no connotation you have with numbers, but I also don't want you guys to think that the scaling of them matters or means anything. Like, ooh, 1 is like the lowest and 9 is the highest. That means nothing. It's just arbitrary.
And no matter what, you have some degree of all 9 of these types in you. And to explore them all and to understand each type is to kind of understand the full range of the human experience, both within yourself and in other people. And even when you take the test, like Kristen and I did, we took the paid version, it gives you the exact breakdown of like how many questions you answered in your dominant type, all the way down to how many questions you answered for the least dominant type. And still, I had like 8 questions that I'd answered for my least dominant type. Now, that's 8 out of 144, which is not a lot. But it's almost impossible for you to have literally no experience with any of these types. You will.
And I would argue that one of the benefits of the Enneagram is that the more you become familiar with the types, the more you can consciously choose to access the parts of yourself when appropriate, when necessary, that correspond to each type. So there might be times when you say, I want to exercise my inner 8, or I want to tap into my inner 1 for this scenario or this situation that I'm in, because you have all of them and all of them have a lot of upsides. So you get to be even more intentional and whole as a person when you play with the different levels.
Okay, so now we're going to actually, because the book is going to do it in a more succinct way than we can. So we're going to go through and read you the summary for right now of each of the 9 types. And then we're going to get into, for a minute, some of what I think is a really interesting facet, which is the basic fears and the basic desires of each type. And then we're going to kind of wrap this portion up. And the next portion, I kind of wanted to do all of this in one sitting, but it would literally be at least a 90-minute episode. And I think it's good for you guys to absorb
I think you would start
bits.
tuning out at some point
Yes.
because it's just so much information.
It's just too much information. So let's go through the types and we'll give you like a basic familiarity with them. Hopefully, if you haven't taken it yet between now and next Friday, you'll go and take it and then you'll be ready to get even more deep into your type next time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to read type 1?
Yes. So type 1 is what they're calling the reformer, the principled idealistic type. Ones are ethical and conscientious with a strong sense of right and wrong. They are teachers and crusaders, always striving to improve things, but also afraid of making a mistake. Well organized, orderly, and fastidious, they try to maintain high standards but can slip into being critical and perfectionistic. They typically have problems with repressed anger and impatience. At their best, healthy ones are wise, discerning, realistic, and noble, as well as morally heroic.
This is my secondary type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a healthy amount of this.
I definitely have a fixation on justice. So that's where this shows
always
up.
Have, yes.
That right and wrong. Like this, I'm never more of a 1 than when I'm loading the dishwasher.
There is a right way to do that.
There damn well is, and you better respect it. And I'm not going to do this for every type. It would be fun, but I don't know enough about the Enneagram. Also, one thing we haven't said, let me pause and say this. It's not easy to type other people.
No, because a lot of this is your inner instincts
yes.
and desires and fears that people might be not showing to you.
No.
And even sometimes hiding from themselves.
Right. So sometimes what someone is acting out or behaving is not necessarily what they're feeling on the inside. So yes, sometimes it's pretty easy to type someone, but a lot of the time you're really off base. I've noticed that a couple times where I assumed someone's type was one thing and I found out it was completely different and I was astounded.
Yeah.
So you can't make any assumptions. Like someone really has to take it for themselves before you can get clear on what they are. That said, I like to think of ones as the Hermione Grangers.
Yes.
I really think she's a 1. I'm pretty confident. She fits all of what was just described.
Yeah, very much so.
So I'm not going to do that for all of the Harry Potter characters because I'm not totally sure, but I'm saying that's Hermione Granger.
I would agree.
Okay, so type 2, the helper, the caring interpersonal type. 2s are empathetic, sincere, and warm-hearted. They are friendly, generous, and self-sacrificing, but they can also be sentimental, flattering, and people-pleasing. They are driven to be close to others, and they often do things for others in order to be needed. They typically have problems taking care of themselves and acknowledging their own needs. At their best, healthy 2s are unselfish and altruistic and have unconditional love for themselves and others.
This is my secondary one.
Ugh.
Yeah, I have a good amount of this one. It's not my main one, but it's my second.
Well, what's funny is that Kristen is a type 9, and we'll talk about that more in the end, and a type 2. And when she took it, she got 30 points for type 9 and 25 points for type 2. When I took it, I got 24 points for type 4 and 24 points for type 1.
So I'm very 9.
Yes. So her first and second are higher than my first, which are tied. Even though I relate more to being a 4 than a 1, even though when I took the quiz or the test, it said I was tied. I don't believe that I'm tied. Yeah. I believe I'm more of a 4.
I believe you are too.
Yeah. But anyway, so you're very heavily weighted on that front. So type 2s, they literally called them out for people pleasing. To me, a type 2 is very often a classic people pleaser.
Yes.
Like when we describe the 3 types of people pleasers in our July side chat, this type 2s, they are kind of I think the mold of the classic people pleaser. Not that they can't have all of them.
Sure. The ones who just want everyone to like them and want to say yes to everyone.
And fix things.
And genuinely do care about people.
Very much.
Genuinely want them to be happy.
But that need to be needed.
Very much.
Huge with this type.
Mm-hmm. Okay. On to type 3. The achiever. The adaptable, success-oriented type. 3s are self-assured, attractive, and charming. Ambitious, competent, and energetic. They can also be status conscious and highly driven for personal advancement. 3s are often concerned about their image and what others think of them. They typically have problems with workaholism and competitiveness. At their best, healthy 3s are self-accepting, authentic, and everything they seem to be, role models who inspire others. I see these as maybe the perfectionist type of people pleaser more often.
Yeah, I need you. Well, okay, so I think of type 2s as I really want you to love me, And I think of type 3s as I need you to think highly of me.
Yes.
It's a slightly different take on it.
And my achievements and what I have done.
And my worth is measured through my work.
Yes.
And I tend to get the most validation through what I do rather than who I'm being, which is maybe more of a type 2 thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I get to read my type. Excellent. Type 4, the individualist. The romantic, introspective type. 4s are self-aware, sensitive, reserved, and quiet. They're self-revealing, emotionally honest, and personal, but they can also be moody and self-conscious. Withholding themselves from others due to feeling vulnerable and defective, they can also feel disdainful and exempt from ordinary ways of living. They typically have problems with self-indulgence and self-pity. At their best, healthy 4s are inspired and highly creative, able to renew themselves and transform their experiences.
Yeah. Sounds like you.
It's bad, but it's true.
Well, but for better or for worse, like all of them.
I like being a 4 because at your best, you're very intuitive and, of course, what are type 4s most often? Artists and actors and like troubled musicians
a little bit
and
of
stuff.
The tortured artist.
Yeah, of course. But like the parts about thinking that you're okay. So here's me and all the 4s I've coached so far have one big thing in common. They think more than any of the other types, why am I so different than everyone else? Like 4s have a fixation on being different. That's why they're called the individualist. And so they can often get tied to their problems.
They want to be different, but they also don't always like feeling different.
But they want to be accepted too.
Right.
So it's a little bit difficult because they often feel attached to the things that make them different, even if those things aren't good for them. Mm-hmm. So then they have a hard time letting those identities go.
But it can also be isolating to feel that different. Yeah.
So we'll get into more of that, but I 100% relate to all of that.
Okay, on to type 5, the investigator. The intense cerebral type. 5s are alert, insightful, and curious. They're able to concentrate and focus on developing complex ideas and skills. Independent and innovative, they can become preoccupied with their thoughts and imaginary constructs. They become detached, yet high-strung and intense. They typically have problems with isolation, eccentricity, and nihilism. At their best, healthy 5s are visionary pioneers, often ahead of their time and able to see the world in an entirely new way.
I think this is the Sherlock Holmes type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very much so. Very cerebral, very much in your head.
The Einstein type too, who's just like pushing ideas past where anyone else has experienced them. Mm-hmm. This is in my top as well. Yeah. And how I relate to this and how I see I have at least one client who has a good deal of 5. And what I've seen is that 5s often can be because they're so up in their head, they're often observing life rather than participating in it. Yes. And I've seen that problem within myself. Not that that's always a problem, because it can be a great benefit to be a strong observer. But if it gets to the point where you're thinking about life more than you're living it, and you're like, no, I'm going to just take more classes rather than actually go try something, that's, I think, a type 5 problem. Yeah. It's a little bit, it's a talent and a crutch at the same time.
Well, so is all this stuff.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. If you're a type 4, if you're super moody, that can be good in that you can be really artistic and channel your feelings into things that move people. Or you can be kind of a brat who doesn't want to do anything and wants to complain and whine all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Type 6, the loyalist. The committed, security-oriented type. 6s are reliable, hardworking, and responsible, but they can also be defensive, evasive, and highly anxious, running on stress while complaining about it. They're often cautious and indecisive, but can also be reactive, defiant, and rebellious. They typically have problems with self-doubt and suspicion. At their best, healthy 6s are internally stable, self-confident, and self-reliant, courageously supporting the weak and powerless.
I have a little bit of that one, but I don't.
It's in your top.
I don't relate to it as much.
It's in your top 3, actually.
But I see parts of it in myself.
In the people I've coached who have type 6, it absolutely manifests as this wanting to trust themselves, but having a hard time getting in touch with their intuition and putting a lot of reliance on outside stuff, even though that can kind of frustrate them, like other people, and putting their trust into authority figures and overthinking everything. And big type 6 thing is catastrophizing. Always jumping to the worst case scenario.
If I had read this one 10 years ago, I would have been like, ooh, yeah.
You would have related to it more.
Yeah, I don't identify with it as much. That's probably because I've done a lot of personal growth work. But growing up, oh man, I was that. I was a worrywart as a kid. So that makes sense. Okay. Type 7, the enthusiast. The busy, productive type. 7s are versatile, optimistic, and spontaneous. Playful, high-spirited, and practical. They can also be overextended, scattered, and undisciplined. They constantly seek new and exciting experiences, but they can become distracted and exhausted by staying on the go. They typically have problems with superficiality and impulsiveness. At their best, healthy 7s focus their talents on worthwhile goals, becoming joyous, highly accomplished, and full of gratitude.
So some of you are going to be like, is this a side hustle?
I was going to say a lot of side hustlers are probably going to have some 7 energy.
I think it's likely that if you're a side hustler, you might have more type 7 than another passion profile.
But I'm not going to say you are one,
No,
but you probably have that in your top.
It's more likely that you have it in your
There's
top
just a
3.
lot in common in terms of what you care about,
the
and
FOMO,
how you're wired,
and then needing to like always be doing things, and of course
wanting variety and to be productively busy.
And the downside can be, of course, that you're running from your feelings. Like you don't want to sit with your issues or your feelings because it's scary. So the way you deal with fear is you're just running at the world and like, blah, 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 I can't hear you. I'm just going to do all the things. That's kind of what I think of a type 7 as.
Right. But also, when channeled productively, you
get a lot
done.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, type 8, the challenger. This is my dad. And also apparently Donald Trump. So take that for what you will.
Okay.
The powerful, dominating type. 8s are self-confident, strong, and assertive, protective, resourceful, and decisive. They can also be proud and domineering. 8s feel that they must control their environment, often becoming confrontational and intimidating. They typically have problems with allowing themselves to be close to others. At their best, healthy 8s are self-mastering. They use their strength to improve others' lives, becoming heroic, magnanimous, and sometimes historically great.
Yeah, so you can see, once again, when channeled well, these qualities can be those of a real great leader. Or, if not channeled well, they can be a little aggressive.
Yeah, I feel bad
bullying.
I feel bad for not giving you any good examples of a type 8. So another, like a good example would be maybe FDR. It says in the book. Oh, Martin Luther King Jr. was also a type, and Toni Morrison, who recently passed away.
These are going to be least likely to be your people pleasers, I would say.
Yes, I would say so.
They don't care so much about whether you like them or not.
They're going to push the line on that for sure. And then
my type 9, the peacemaker, the easygoing, self-effacing type. 9s are accepting, trusting, and stable. They're good-natured, kind-hearted, easygoing, and supportive, but can also be too willing to go along with others to keep the peace. They want everything to be without conflict, but can tend to be complacent and minimize anything upsetting. They typically have problems with passivity and stubbornness. At their best, healthy 9s are indomitable and all-embracing. They're able to bring people together and heal conflicts. Oh yeah, that's me. Chew a tea. These are probably going to be most likely to be your avoidant people pleasers.
100%.
Because they just want to smooth over all the conflict. That's why they're the peacemaker. They're probably the people who tend to keep the peace among their families or friend groups. And they don't like anything that upsets their environment or their internal state.
Not to call you out, but that's what I'm good at. So I'm going to do that. We're going to get into this more next time. Not for all the types, like their relationship with certain emotions. But 9s are excellent at being in denial.
Oh, yeah.
Really good at
especially denying
reality.
Things that you don't want to see that are
100%,
upsetting or that don't make you feel very good.
Or that don't jive with what you want to be true.
The stubbornness, that's where that piece comes in, is
Yeah.
stubbornly sticking to your viewpoint on things because you don't want to see it another way. And again, that's what happens when you let the car veer off where it wants to go. So you have to constantly be checking in with yourself to make sure that you're seeing the truth.
I have been your nagging passenger pulling the steering wheel for you.
Yes.
for as long as I've known you. And recently you've been better at doing it yourself.
Checking on my own
But I'm
steering wheel.
still there. I'm still in the back seat. I'm backseat driving. I might not be side seat driving anymore, but I'm still
That's your
backseat
one
driving.
coming in.
For sure. Though it did
Backseat
say on one of the sites we were looking at, it talked about the relationships between, like you can actually do compatibility between any type and another type.
Yeah.
So we looked at what are some of the common issues between 4s and 9s, and it was hilarious. It was like,
Oh my
well,
God,
9s are really good at
so
denying
spot on.
reality, and 4s are obsessed with telling the truth and being emotionally honest. So guess what happens is the 4 is going to be constantly nagging a 9 to be honest with themselves, which
And then
is
you have 1 as well.
our whole dynamic.
Yeah, so you're going to have it even more amplified.
Probably. So, okay. Now we're going to get into something I really like, which is we're going to talk about the basic fears and then the basic desires and how those can get distorted. And then that's going to be like where we're going to end it. So I'm actually going to do them at the same time because I think it makes sense to piggyback and go back and forth. So, okay. I'm going to start with 1. The 1's basic fear is of being bad, corrupt, evil, or defective. Like everyone has a core fear. That's yours if you're a 1. Which means, complementary to that, your basic desire is to have integrity. Because, of course, that's the counterpoint to feeling like you're bad or maybe you're corrupt or you're evil or you're defective. But desires can easily deteriorate if you're unconscious. So what having integrity can deteriorate into if you're acting out of fear is critical perfectionism. Beating yourself up constantly internally, holding yourself to exacting standards.
Yes.
That's going to be one of your core struggles if you're a 1.
Yep. For 2, their basic fear is being unworthy or not being loved.
Yeah.
So because of that, of course,
Or unworthy of being loved.
their desire is to be loved. That's what they want more than anything because they're so afraid that they're not worthy of that. So that's a fine desire in and of itself, but it can deteriorate if taken too
Very
far.
easily.
And if pursued unconsciously, which is in the need to be needed.
Yes.
I need it, there's a very
Desperation,
neediness
little bit,
to
yeah.
it.
Clinginess, yeah.
Yeah. And not letting people out of your sight and kind of gripping onto them with
Love me,
white
love
knuckles.
me, love me. Yeah.
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 So I know this isn't all very unflattering. That's the point of the Enneagram.
Yeah.
If you feel called out, we're doing it right. Okay?
Yes.
Because trust me, when I read the worst parts of 4, I didn't feel good. But it helps you understand where you need to focus in order to grow out of the things that are keeping you trapped. Because if you stay married to these fears and then you're allowing those fears to influence your actions, then you're not free. You're being held hostage by your personality.
You have to be able to see very clearly where you are now if you're ever going to grow beyond where you are now. And
That's why I like the Enneagram. It's just a call out. The whole
most
thing.
of us don't want to see some of the dark underbelly
It's not fun.
of ourselves. But once you do, you can take back power over it. So
Yes,
this is
that's
worthwhile.
the whole point. We're going to get to, like, by the end of this 2-part conversation, I end on a positive note. I promise. Okay. So type 3, the basic fear is of being worthless or without inherent value, which means your basic desire is to be valuable. But what that can quickly devolve into is chasing after success. Always, always, always after that next thing, that next goal, that next metric, moving the goalpost 50 yards on yourself and never being satisfied with what you have.
You want to be valuable, but it can deteriorate into trying to do external things
Proving
to
your
prove
worth
your
all the time.
value, which
Yeah.
doesn't actually get to the core
Yep.
fear. But
Mm-hmm.
yep. Okay. So 4s, Rachel's type. The basic fear is being without identity or personal significance, which turns into the deep desire to want to be oneself, which is great. However, if taken too far, it can deteriorate into self-indulgence.
Let me tell you what that means. What that
From personal
means,
experience.
what that means is that in your worst moments, I'm special, and so I deserve a break. Or I deserve something different because my problems are harder than everyone else's problems.
Or I shouldn't have to do this.
I'm different. Why should I have to do that?
Uh-huh.
I shouldn't have to do that.
I've heard some of those exact phrases come out of your mouth.
This week. I mean, yeah. Also, the obsession with significance and being like different. I remember when I was like 12 in the bathroom, I would often practice interviews Like, I would just be giving people interviews.
Like, you would be getting interviewed?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
For whatever great thing you had done.
Yeah. But I remember being like, oh, it's going to be awful if I die and no one remembers me or what I did. Like, when I was 12, I was like, I want to be significant. So, like, yes, like, it's there. It's just in your, it's baked into your personality. I actually don't care that much about being significant anymore. So I think I have evolved past some of my type.
Yeah, right. Which is the goal.
Right.
That's what we're doing here.
But I do definitely still resonate with being different and having like a very unique identity. And I'm very attached to that reality.
You should see her face as she's saying it.
I'm like she's really like, emphatic about that.
Well, and also being a little calling yourself out.
Well, okay. Yeah, sure. I don't totally, I mean, yeah, I believe that. Okay. We're moving on. 5. Okay. Your basic fear is of being useless, incapable, or incompetent, which means your desire is to be competent. But what that deteriorates into is useless specialization. Basically, knowing all the things, but you're not doing anything with them.
Being like a trivia expert of some random...
That makes me sad because I am that. I have some type 5 in me.
Some random factoids that don't...
just learning all the things, but never utilizing them in real life. It's just like learning for the sake of learning, which can be fun, but it's almost just like you're accumulating knowledge for no real purpose.
You're like hoarding
information. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, 6s. Their deepest fear is being without support or guidance. So that means they really, really desire to be secure. Now, again, all of these desires are perfectly fine, but if it deteriorates too much, it can deteriorate into this strong attachment to your belief system.
So I what I've seen in the book, and I totally think this is true for some people, is that it can become an attachment to institutions.
Yep.
So if you're like a type 6 and you're a doctor, but you're not an evolved type 6, you'll be totally unopen to any new medical discoveries or maybe like fringe treatments or alternative treatments.
And you want security.
Right. Or like clinging to religious doctrine and not being open-minded about other people's religious perspectives, that kind of thing.
Or laws and rules like, well, this is how things are. And if we just stay with what we know, then we can stay secure.
Right. I have a type 6 client who very, very much relates to these are the rules. Why are other people not following them? And she calls herself out about it. And she doesn't necessarily like that about herself because that's not what the Enneagram is about. It's actually about the things you kind of feel icky about. But she sees that totally about like what just life would be easier if everyone played by the rules.
Yeah.
And my life would be orderly and I could relax if everyone would just follow the rules.
So you grip onto those beliefs or those rules or those stable things.
Yeah, doctrines or whatever.
You don't want anything to rock your boat of security.
Yes. So the basic fear of a 7 is of being deprived or trapped in a state of pain, which means your desire is to be happy, which is funny because everyone's like, isn't that everyone's desire? But everyone has kind of like a more core desire.
I mean, everyone wants all these things, to be loved, to be valuable, to be happy, to be secure.
It's just the one that you fixate on the most.
Yes.
So if your basic fear is of being deprived or trapped in a state of pain and all you want is to be happy, then what that can easily devolve into is frenetic escapism. You're just constantly bouncing from thing to thing to thing, looking for something outside of you to deliver you happiness instead of finding it within yourself.
Or to distract you from any potential pain.
Yes.
Because you are so afraid of feeling pain. So it's like, this will make me happy, and this will make me happy, and this will make me happy. And you just kind of leap into all of them.
You can never just take a breath and like really get centered and grounded.
Yep. So the basic fear of an 8 is being harmed or controlled by others.
This is, I mean, knowing my dad, 100%. 100%. Don't tell me what to do. Do not tell me what I can or can't do.
Yeah. Do not control me.
Yes.
Do not take advantage of me.
Yep. No.
So because of that, their greatest desire is to protect themselves.
Yep.
Because they're so afraid everyone's going to come in and try to take over or hurt them in some way. Which the self-protection is fine, but it can deteriorate into constant fighting.
I mean, that's it.
Just picking battles where you don't need to pick battles, or sticking
always
your claim,
on the defensive,
being very suspicious. Like I'm gonna pick a battle before you can hurt me.
Very aggressive and can often just come in with your hackles up on
Yes.
guard, defensive, all the time. Yeah, very porcupine energy on that one. I have some of that if you're shocked to learn, aren't you? Okay, and then 9. We're going to call it Kristen now. Her turn. Your basic fear is of loss of connection and fragmentation.
Totally.
Yep. Which means your basic desire is to be at peace.
100%.
Yes. But that deteriorates into stubborn neglectfulness of reality.
I don't want to see things that
Yes.
disrupt my peace. That is
Yes.
me to a T. I hate feeling anxious or unsettled. I want to just get back to that state of peace because that's what I love.
I can't stand this about you, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, you don't always need to be
But
at peace.
I got to tell you, you're a 9. I'm almost positive my mom is a 9, and one of my other close friends is a 9. I have learned a lot about 9s in the past couple months, and you guys have some great qualities too. I'm not here to crap all over you being a 9, but that stubborn neglectfulness of reality has been a big thorn in our relationship side.
Yeah, it has.
We've had to work through that. You've had to own up to reality, and I have had to let go of the need for everyone to be as unique and special as me, and for me to be right all the time, which is that type 1 coming in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I end up being a lot more of an optimist by nature, which it can be good, but it can also
I'm a
be
huge
taken way
pessimist
too
by
far.
nature,
It can
so
be taken way too far. So, yeah, pros and cons. Being a
Of course.
pessimist can help you be a little bit more
realistic.
aware of what's going on, but
Well, then you're a moody bitch, which is also accurate. So, okay, so we're gonna wrap up. We're gonna start wrapping up this episode.
that was only half of what we have to tell you guys. Can you believe that?
The other one may or may not be longer. I think it could be longer, just based on what I have on that outline. It's a longer outline. So, but I'm really excited to get into it because next time we're going to dive much more into the specifics and deeper themes of each type. We're going to talk some about childhood wounds, like the messages you received in childhood that effed you up according to your type. We're going to talk about some of the core emotions you experience and how you relate to core emotions like anger and sadness and fear as each type. And we're going to talk about how you can grow and evolve and what direction you need to move into in order to escape the trappings of your type and to really be a really self-fulfilling, evolved, best version of your type.
Right. So having heard us talk through these, you might have a sense of where you fall, but if you want your more accurate report, make sure to take the Enneagram before next week because it'll help you really understand the deeper depths we're going into with our next conversation. And again, we've got a couple of links for you, a free version if you don't want to pay for it, which is totally understandable, or $12 if you're willing to pay a little bit. So take that and come back and join us next week for part 2.
And of course, getting over people pleasing. Again, if you want to join us, enrollment is open until Tuesday. That $50 discount code expires at the end of today. So get on the VIP list in the episode description to get that discount code. Just FYI, you can pay for the course in 1 or 2 payments, and the $50 applies to either payment, whether you do upfront or in payments. The payments are a little bit more than if you pay upfront. Like you'll save money if you do the upfront version. But for those of you who can't, there's a 2-payment option. And we're getting started officially with the first week's worth of lessons on Wednesday, the next day, Wednesday the 28th. But there's already plenty of homework. If you sign up right away, you're going to immediately have stuff to do. One of the things is take the Enneagram.
Right, which now you can do in advance and be ready to post about that in the forum because we're going to want to hear from you guys about what types you identify with. So you can leave a comment on this episode to share your type.
I would love to know what your type is.
Whether
or
or not you join the course. But if you join the course, we'll have a much more in-depth conversation, I'm sure, in the forum about the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we hope to see some of you in today in Getting Over People Pleasing. And we will be back with you we'll be back on Tuesday.
With a blog from me.
Yes, but then we'll be back
Next Friday
with the part 2 of this episode.
All right. See you on Tuesday.